The ballroom was still ringing from the sound of glass smashing on marble. Jonathan Pryce stood trembling at the center, his hand still outstretched from hurling the decanter, his face an ugly shade of crimson. His voice cracked as he pointed toward the man standing calmly at the edge of the spotlight. "You think you can humiliate me? Here? In front of them?" The man's black vest clung neatly to his frame, his sleeves rolled just above his wrists. He wasn't dressed like anyone else in the room, yet every eye was on him now. Ethan Cole, a waiter, a shadow only minutes ago, stood unflinching. "I didn't humiliate you, sir," Ethan replied quietly, his words cutting through the stunned silence like a blade. "You did that yourself." A murmur rippled through the gala crowd. Pearls shifted, champagne flutes froze midair. The great Jonathan Pryce, the billionaire everyone envied, suddenly looked like a man cornered. And as Ethan adjusted his vest and began to turn away, the story folded back to the beginning. Weeks earlier, the mansion bustled with noise as Ethan balanced a tray of crystal glasses. His steps were silent, his posture steady. He moved among the wealthy like a ghost. He was there, but never seen. "Keep moving, kid," the head butler muttered. "Don't linger." Ethan gave the smallest nod. He didn't need to linger. He caught every word spoken around him while passing unnoticed. 12 million into the hedge fund, by next quarter it doubles. Pryce's new acquisition, rumor is he bullied half the board into selling. That boy from nothing, can you believe it, self-made they call him, ha. Old money made him. Each snippet was a thread. Ethan collected them all. He wasn't just serving drinks, he was studying. Then the crowd shifted. Jonathan Pryce entered. His presence was gravitational. The laughter grew louder, the applause more eager, the eyes more desperate. Pryce thrived on it. He cut across the room, tall, commanding, his Rolex flashing in chandelier light. "Jonathan, you've done it again," a senator's wife gushed. Pryce smirked. "Done what, dear?" "I don't compete. I win." Ethan kept his expression blank, but he was listening. He always listened. Later that night, in the smoking lounge, Ethan carried in another tray. Pryce leaned back in a leather chair, brandy in hand, voice thick with arrogance. "Gentlemen," he declared, "intelligence is overrated. Power, that's what matters. Anyone can be bought. Anyone." The laughter echoed. Ethan's eyes flicked toward Pryce, then away. The words etched into his memory like ink on paper. Days passed. Ethan served, silent and steady. He heard everything. He saw more. The careless whispers, the cruel dismissals, the arrogance Pryce couldn't contain. Pryce bragged to donors that his charity was impeccable. Ethan noticed the figures didn't add up when receipts crossed his tray. Pryce boasted about mergers, but Ethan overheard contradictions in private lounges. He never confronted. He planted seeds. At one dinner, Pryce joked about a merger. Ethan, pouring wine, repeated a figure just loud enough for two guests nearby. A small discrepancy. Barely noticeable, until it wasn't. At another gala, Pryce boasted about spotless charity accounts. Ethan, carrying a tray past two donors, murmured, "Strange, I thought the numbers showed a gap." He let it drop like a slip, an accident. But it was no accident. He didn't need to invent lies. Pryce had enough of his own. Ethan only sharpened them, repeated them, mirrored them. Slowly, the whispers grew. Doubt spread. And Pryce, blind in his arrogance, never saw it. The night of the Midtown Gala, the ballroom shimmered with chandeliers and strings of violins. Guests sparkled with diamonds, their laughter brittle as glass. Jonathan Pryce was in his element. He took the stage, arms wide, soaking in their worship. "Ladies and gentlemen, tonight we celebrate not just wealth, but legacy. My legacy. A name that means trust, power, and untouchable success. Polite applause. Nods of approval. But at the edge of the crowd, Ethan's eyes glimmered. He stepped forward, his tray steady, his voice even. "Trust, sir," he said, not loud, but piercing. "Is that what you call it when you gamble with futures and laugh while men lose their homes?" The silence was immediate, suffocating. Price froze, blinking into the crowd. "What?" Ethan held his gaze. "Do you call it trust when you brag about fixing deals in smoke-filled lounges? Or when you boast of charity accounts that don't quite balance?" Gasps rippled through the crowd. Faces turned. Price barked a laugh, but it cracked halfway. "This is absurd. Who the hell are you?" Ethan's reply was calm. "A waiter. The one you never noticed. The one who remembers every word you've said when you thought no one cared." The crowd shifted uneasily. Price sneered. "You think anyone will believe a nobody like you?" Ethan tilted his head slightly. "Do I need them to believe me? Or do I just need them to wonder if you're lying?" Murmurs erupted. Donors leaned into each other, whispers quick as sparks. Price slammed the podium. "Lies. All of it. Lies." But his voice was too loud, too desperate. The room smelled blood. Ethan placed his tray gently on a nearby table. His voice was almost soft. "You've built your empire on arrogance, Mr. Price. I'm just holding up the mirror." The silence after was heavier than stone. Jonathan Price's face twisted, his jaw tight, his hands shaking. He looked less like a king, more like a man stripped bare. And then, the moment that would tip it all. One guest, a board member long bullied into silence, stood up. "Jonathan, is it true? About the accounts?" Another voice joined, sharper. "And the deal? The merger?" Questions flew, fast, relentless. Price raised his hands, shouting over them. "Enough. I will not be questioned. Not by you, and certainly not by," he jabbed a finger toward Ethan. "Him." But the spell was broken. The crowd no longer worshipped. They doubted. Ethan met Price's gaze one last time. "This isn't the end, Mr. Price. Tonight, it begins." And as he turned to leave, the murmurs swelling into chaos behind him, Price shouted after him, his voice hoarse with fury. "You'll regret this. Do you hear me? You're nothing. Nothing." But Ethan didn't stop. He walked through the golden doors into the New York night, the whispers of the elite swirling in his wake. And though Price stood in his ballroom surrounded by wealth, power, and chandeliers, for the first time in his life, he felt truly cornered. The city lights burned outside, waiting for what would come next. Because Ethan hadn't destroyed him yet. Not completely. That was still to come. And when it came, it would not just shake a room. It would shatter an empire. The night after the gala, Jonathan Price sat alone in his penthouse, lights dim, city skyline glittering beyond the glass wall. His tie hung loose, his brandy untouched. The murmurs from the gala still echoed in his head. Doubt. Laughter. Whispers. A waiter had done that to him. A nobody. He clenched his fists, whispering to himself. "I'll crush him. I'll bury him." But the truth gnawed at him. The crowd had seen something that couldn't be unseen. The cracks were there. And Ethan Cole had simply held up the mirror. Meanwhile, Ethan walked the wet streets of Manhattan, no longer a ghost. For the first time in years, his steps felt heavier, but not from burden, from purpose. He hadn't finished. Price still stood, arrogant, wounded but alive. To break his pride completely, Ethan needed something bigger. Public. Irreversible. The chance came sooner than expected. Jonathan Price, desperate to restore his image, announced a charity banquet at the Metropolitan Grand, an event televised, covered by the press, attended by senators, CEOs, and the kind of old money that dictated the city's future. It was his attempt to reclaim dignity. For Ethan, it was the perfect stage. He managed his way into the staff roster, just another name in a sea of servers. Once again, invisible. But not to himself. Not tonight. The night of the banquet, the hall glowed with chandeliers, cameras flashing as limousines arrived. Price strode in wearing his most immaculate tuxedo, his smile stretched too wide, too forced. "Jonathan, you're a hero," someone gushed, shaking his hand. "Ignore the rumors." He laughed hollowly. "Rumors are for the poor. Legacy is for men like me." But his eyes darted, restless. He was still bleeding from Ethan's first strike. Ethan carried a tray of champagne, weaving through the crowd like a phantom. Every guest's conversation, every careless word, fed into his memory. But tonight, he wasn't just listening. Tonight, he would speak. As the orchestra swelled, Price mounted the stage, microphone in hand. Cameras turned. Lights followed. "Ladies and gentlemen," he began, voice dripping with rehearsed confidence, "tonight we celebrate generosity, trust, and the enduring legacy of the Price Foundation. No matter what is said, no matter the noise, my commitment remains unshaken." Polite applause. Ethan's jaw tightened. Price continued, louder now. "There are those who would tear down success out of envy. Small men, desperate for attention. But tonight proves, I cannot be broken." And that was Ethan's cue. From the edge of the room, his voice cut through the applause. Calm. Measured. Inevitable. "Then why do you look like a man already broken?" Gasps. Heads turned. Cameras swiveled. Jonathan froze. His smile faltered. His eyes scanned the crowd until they landed on him. Ethan, standing still, tray set aside, gaze unflinching. The billionaire's face contorted. "You. How dare you show your face here?" Ethan took a step forward. The room seemed to part around him. "You wanted a stage, Mr. Price. I thought I'd join you on it." Laughter rippled nervously among the guests. The camera zoomed closer. Price barked into the microphone. "Security. Remove him." But no guard moved. Not yet. The crowd was riveted. This was better than opera. Ethan raised his voice, not shouting, but carrying with clarity. "Shall I remind this audience what you said in the smoking lounge last month? That, power is what matters, anyone can be bought? Or should I repeat what you bragged about, your charity accounts, your mergers? I don't have to prove it. You've said it all yourself." The crowd buzzed, voices overlapping. Reporters scribbled furiously. Price's composure cracked, his voice rising. "He's lying. He's nothing but a servant." Ethan smiled faintly. "Yes. A servant who listened. A servant who remembers. A servant who knows the numbers in your own accounts better than you. Shall I recite them? The gaps? The losses you covered with borrowed pride?" A senator leaned toward another. "Is this true?" A board member whispered, "I've seen the books." "He's right." The whispers multiplied, a storm sweeping the room. Jonathan's voice cracked, desperate now. "Do not listen to him. He has no proof." Ethan's eyes glinted. "You want proof? Look at your own reactions. Look at how quickly you rage. Innocent men laugh at accusations. Guilty men break under them." The room erupted. Some guests turned away in disgust. Others stared, hungry for every word. The cameras captured it all. Jonathan Price, red-faced, veins bulging, shouting against a man he dismissed as invisible. Price pounded the podium. "You will regret this. I'll ruin you." Ethan stepped closer, his voice calm as steel. "I was already ruined. Scraping by, invisible, serving men like you. But tonight, I'm not invisible anymore. Tonight, they see me. And they see you for what you are." The crowd gasped, some clapped, some jeered. The tide had turned. Jonathan's hands trembled. His voice dropped to a hiss only Ethan could hear. "What do you want? Money? I'll drown you in it." Ethan leaned in, his whisper sharp as glass. "I don't want your money. I want your pride. And it's already gone." Then, louder, for everyone, "I'm done serving drinks. Tonight, I serve the truth." The applause thundered. Cameras flashed. Guests shouted questions. Jonathan Price stood frozen, stripped bare in front of the world. Not bankrupt, not defeated in wealth, but humiliated, his legacy shattered. Ethan didn't wait for security. He turned, walked calmly through the stunned crowd, each step heavier with dignity. The chandeliers shimmered above, but for once, they didn't belong to Jonathan Price. They belonged to the man who had risen from nothing and left with everything that mattered. As he reached the door, a reporter's voice carried behind him, "Who is he?" And another replied, breathless, "The man who broke Jonathan Price." Ethan didn't turn back. He walked into the New York night, his figure swallowed by the city lights. And behind him, in the grandest hall of the city, the billionaire stood silent, broken in pride, the empire of arrogance crumbling not in dollars, but in dignity. The waiter was gone. The man remained. And though the cameras captured Jonathan Price's fall, the world would remember only the quiet dignity of the one who had risen. The story was over. Or perhaps, it had only just begun.